Kapil, when we last spoke over 4 years ago, you were managing $5 million. I just heard some incredible news that you had secured a prestigious family office that has given you a clear intention that they want to consume your entire $1 billion capacity. Before we dive into that journey, I have to ask, what advice do you wish you could tell your 5 million self back then and why?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think what I would tell my $5 million self um, is just the importance really just of sticking with it and being consistent and just really constantly just reassuring myself that look, if you keep doing the right thing, then the right outcome inevitably has to unfold. I think that's what I really go back and tell myself. And I think, I mean, easier said than done, right? As we all know, because I think, to be honest, like, hey, look, it's a very winding journey, and there's no book to show you how to navigate it. It's not as if you learn this in school, right? So I think, regardless of kind of this kind of a sage advice, I think, look, I mean, there's going to be, I can tell you in my case, to be very open about it, like, look, there's sleepless nights. There's honestly, nights where you honestly just kind of like wake up crying because, you're working so hard day after day after day after day. And you know what? You don't see any results, right? Results mean like actually an inflow per se, right? But look, just the importance of just being consistent, being relentless, just understanding that look, just keep doing the right thing day after day after day, and eventually the results will be there.
Yeah, yeah, totally. What was the most important lesson you learned during this incredible journey? And when did that light bulb moment happen?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the most important thing I learned is I would say just really the importance of consistency, right? I mean, it's really a marathon, not a sprint. So the important thing is like each and every day just to kind of put your hours in. And I would say at a higher level, Amanda, just I know this sounds kind of cliche, but just look, I mean, you have to love what you do, right? I mean, if you don't love what you do, then inevitably, you know what, you're going to stop doing it. And so I think it forces you to kind of take a step back holistically and ask yourself, okay, well, why am I doing this? Is it because my parents want me to do it? Is it to look cool for my friends? Is it because I want that penthouse in Soho? All of which are not bad reasons, don't get me wrong. But if your why isn't strong enough, then because the journey is so long and so circuitous, you may likely end up giving up along the way. And it's funny because I mean, remember in our space, the alternative is not bad. Like, which you can go to a large bank and if you're a quant, at least, like you can get paid a lot of money, right? And so the alternative actually is still, at least on the surface, quite desirable to a lot of people, right? So I think that there's a natural weed out process whereby only the people that are really hungry and ultimately look, but are really, really, really dedicated to their craft are inevitably going to succeed.
Yeah. So walk me through that moment where you realized you were no longer a startup hedge fund.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I still, I guess, we still have a startup culture internally whereby, everyone on our team, it's very free flowing. We all kind of know each other well as human beings, not just employees. We know each other well, right? And so, internally, I still kind of see ourselves as like a startup, so to speak. But you're right, externally, obviously, it's totally different. I wouldn't say there was one single aha moment where you kind of just wake up and you say, oh wow, like, I'm no longer a startup. Rather, it's kind of like a genesis that takes place over time, is what I would say. But yeah, definitely I think that like I think having a culture internally which supports that that startup mentality whereby everyone's working hard, everyone's free to express their opinion, everyone's free to be creative. For me, that's always been very important.
Yeah. So I know you landed this major family office, and I'm assuming it's changed a lot or everything. Um, so I'd love to have you explain a little bit about the changes that you're experiencing right now. And also, this family office obviously chose you over countless other managers. So, what were they actually looking for? And what were you providing that others may not have?
Yeah, sure. So the changes we're experiencing are obviously we have more capital, right? Right, and that's first and foremost. And with that capital, obviously, there's a lot of things you can do. For example, we're always looking to we're always looking to kind of add to our team, add really talented individuals to our team, to say the least, that fit well into our culture. And that's something that clearly you can do once you have you have the capital base to do it, right? Um, you know, um, to answer your second question about what they were looking for, um, I think that ultimately, and I think this is true for a lot of family offices, Amanda, I think that ultimately what they were looking for is first and foremost, like you have to have the returns, right? You have to have the quality returns. You have to have outperformed your respective peer group, hopefully by a significant amount, because again, especially when you're referring to the really, really prestigious family offices, like you said, they have countless managers to pick from, and you really want to be demonstrate top of the class performance. You really want to be able to demonstrate that within your space, you're the best, right? Um, but to your point, it goes much further than that, right? It's not definitely not just about the quality returns. At a deeper level, I would say it's about the quality of the people, right? And I think that's something that people forget a lot of the times is that this is still ultimately, and Amanda, you know what, with all the machines, with all the AI, and you know me, I'm a quant guy, it's still a people business, right? And I don't think anything will ever take that away from our industry because ultimately, I've known the respective individual at the family office for, gosh, maybe 15 years. So we go way back, and he's seen me through the ups, and you know what? Downs, a lot of downs. And he's seen obviously the commitment, right? The dedication, and really the love of markets, right? Which just kind of like helped us endure a very, very long stretch within this industry. So I think it really boils down to those two things, which is really the quality of the people, and obviously the quality of the returns.
So let's talk about your people. I think this is so important to you. And I know this is something we talked about in our last podcast
Yeah.
4 years ago, over 4 years ago. You've grown from a really small team to 6 people, right?
Mhm.
Approaching $1 billion capacity. So how do you maintain that culture going forward and as you're growing and through the challenging periods?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a aspect of hedge funds which I think is often overlooked, very significantly actually, because I think that in the hedge fund industry, look, everyone knows how to analyze returns, right? Everyone's trained actually to analyze returns using certain metrics, right? Drawdown, Sharpe ratio, annualized returns, etc., right? But I think the people aspect, like understanding the team dynamics underlying the hedge fund that they're investing in, that's much more difficult to assess, right? Especially to quantify. So in our case, I can tell you what we do, Amanda, is that one of the things I always talk about is the importance of what's called commitment culture. Commitment culture just means that, look, you're invested in the long-term success of your respective employee. And look, the long-term success of your employee, it may not mean staying at your company for their entire life. And as we all know, that's normal, right? But it's about really, really, truly looking after them as almost like a family member, right? And so I think that's what commitment culture really encapsulates. And interestingly enough, like I really love reading about like management, management styles, management reviews, business articles, etc. I kind of got really into this, And, there is a body of knowledge, it's not very well known, to back up this commitment culture, which I'm referring to. And there's a great study, by the way, in 2002 by the California Management Review. I know you're a business school person, Amanda, and I'm sure you probably haven't heard of this journal before, right? But they did a great study actually on startups, where they divided up all startups into one of five categories. One of them was commitment culture. One of them was autocratic culture. One of them was star culture, etc. And star culture is what we currently have, right? Where like someone does really well, they get a huge bonus, right? And they found that the startups that followed commitment culture from day one, after 10 years, guess what? Every single one of them were still alive, which to me was like really remarkable. Like for me, that was an aha moment when I saw that. I'm like, oh wow, and it made so much sense and resonated with me internally. Like I didn't really necessarily need an article to justify, my style of management, but like, it just kind of like added further corroboration that look, this culture, it really does produce results, but only in the long run.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
I'm going to jump in because I know you're going to love this question. If I had a bookshelf, what are like the one, two, maybe three books around this topic that you have to have or you would recommend?
Yeah, good question. So on the topic of business and management, obviously Ray Dalio's got a great book, which I'm sure most of us have read, on principles. And obviously, Ray Dalio is another really successful hedge fund manager that clearly he has his own culture as well, which he's thought about very, very carefully. And you'll see, Amanda, the like really successful business people, not only do they think about their product, which in our case is the hedge fund, but they also think about the culture equally as much as the product, if not more, right? And there's an entire philosophy behind the culture. You may not agree with the philosophy, but at least they have one. And it's something that's been very, very well thought out. And so that's, I think, again, one thing which in our industry, I think the next 5 or 10 years, it's one thing I think that's going to change, whereby I think that like, this is training definitely, I think that like every investor should have, right? To understand what kind of culture has been inculcated within the respective firm they're about to allocate to. But getting back to your original question, what books would I really recommend on this topic? First of all, I would recommend, obviously I said principles. Other things I'd recommend is like, look, just the management. There's so many great management reviews from all the respective business schools. And I know you're a Wharton grad, Amanda, so I'm sure maybe not. You're familiar with like the respective management review that Wharton publishes. I really like the HBR. I think they have great articles on just look. I mean, employee happiness. Like just which a lot of things, to be honest, I think are common sense. I mean, that's just my own personal opinion. But I must say, over the years, though, a lot of those um, articles I've found they're very enlightening. I mean, there's a lot of people who've studied this topic intensely. Um, and I guess one thing I will mention, that one quote I love on this topic, as you bring it up, is like, Peter Druckenmiller. He's a famous management guru. He once said a quote which really stuck with me. He said, "Culture trumps strategy for breakfast," and he wasn't referring to like just one specific industry. He was referring to every industry. And so again, it just highlights the importance of just kind of like just having a clear understanding and a clear philosophy on this topic.
Yeah. I think so important. So I want to change the conversation a little bit and go back to kind of, I would love to, I think, because obviously we work with a lot of emerging managers at Prime Alpha. And you did it. Like you're an emerging manager, put the hard work in, almost hitting capacity, um, in a relatively, I mean, it might seem long, but relatively short amount of time. So I'd love to, what advice would you give to the emerging manager that's looking for an institutional type investor? Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the first thing I would say, Amanda, is just be authentic. And again, it sounds so common sense, right? But the reality is, look, I got bombarded with articles about the right way to market your fund, right? I mean, there's so many people who have an opinion, and none of those opinions are wrong. But I think what happens, Amanda, and this is after having gone to, really countless number of conferences where again, you just meet lots of people. And back in the day, I used to go to those really wonderful CTA Expo conferences. And that conference is great because it's all emerging managers. So you meet a lot of people. And yeah, you're right. I mean, over the years, you know what? Like the audience is just totally different. Like every year, I don't know where all those managing managers go, really. um, but I would really say the most important thing is to be authentic and not follow your own style, because there's so many people out there, Amanda, that make obviously a very handsome living off marketing, and it's not a bad thing. But what happens is like all of us are wired differently. So myself, for example, I really enjoy doing things like this. Like I really enjoy getting on a podcast and kind of talking about my lifestyle, my philosophy, etc. But there are a lot of people out there, and you would know much better than me, maybe that's not their forte, and maybe that's not a style suited for them, right? And that's okay too. So you have to find the style that works for you. And it's easier said than done, especially, Amanda, if you're small, like 5 million, you're struggling to pay your bills, just struggling. Realistically, you're probably negative cash flow. So there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of pressure, right? You have to pay your bills, you have to pay your rent, you have to pay perhaps an employee, maybe you're a solo employee. But look, there's a lot of expenses. You have to pay for market data, you have to very least have to have an office, right? You have to have an administrator, et cetera, et cetera. So your cash flow is negative. You're working your brains out day after day after day, and there's no results. And so naturally you think, oh, well, I'm doing something wrong, right? We're working hard. There's no results. Heck, my cash flow is negative. I log into my bank account and like it's going down every month. I'm like, whoa, it's like, what am I doing wrong? And we're trained to think that way, right? But you know what I would tell the emerging manager is, you know what? Like maybe you're not doing anything wrong. It just takes time. It takes a lot of time. So it takes a lot longer than you expected, right? So and this is what makes it really difficult because you see all these overnight successes, right? You see someone, they get a huge allocation just right off the bat. And I see it all the time. And like, you're just inundated with all this media. And naturally, just imagine how you feel. Imagine you're that hedge fund manager, you're managing 5 million, maybe, less than that. You're starting off and like, you see the other people right off the gates just get like $100 million, right? I mean, it hurts. And then you ask yourself, okay, well, what am I doing wrong? And that's where I think that like it's important as an emerging manager to remind yourself, okay, well, hold on a second. This is who I am. This is kind of what I believe in. And this is what it means for me to kind of be authentic to my true self. And then most importantly, Amanda, I would say, look, it just takes time. It's going to take a lot longer than what you expected. And the timeline is pretty much unpredictable. So, yeah, I mean, you better be prepared to strap on your seatbelt. And look, I mean, you could have negative cash flow for a while, but then again, it goes back to that question, which I said before. I'm like, well, why are you doing this? It's like, why are you putting yourself through all this, right? I mean, what's the real reason why deep down inside you're doing it? And I think, Amanda, if that why is strong enough, if it's really something you're passionate about, then yeah, you'll embark on this path and eventually it'll work.
All right. So I have to ask you, what was your authentic journey? Like what worked for you? What was your style? Because I know you love the podcast.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I kind of like, I like the podcast. I kind of like being on video and stuff. For me, that was kind of like my authentic self. Like I've done obviously several video podcasts, which look, I personally like it because I like kind of like I'm all about building, long-term partnerships, long-term relationships. And the only way that can happen is for you have to get to know me as a human being, right? Like you have to know my lifestyle, you have to know who I am, aside from the returns, every one pager said that disclaimer at the bottom, past performance is not indicative of future results. It's really true,
True.
right?
Yes.
But what is indicative of future results, Amanda, is the hedge fund manager's personality,
Yeah.
right? I mean, what is that person's level of commitment? Are they committed? Are they not committed? Like you can't see that from a return stream. You can't see that, you know what, from a 30-minute investor meeting at iConnections, right? The only way to know how committed someone is, hey, you got to put in the work. Just get to know them, right? What is their lifestyle? What do they do on a Friday evening? What do they do on the weekends, right? Do they really, do they like what they do? Do they love what they do? Or are they obsessed with what they do, right? And if they're in that latter category of what, if they're obsessed with what they do, you know what? Eventually, they're going to be successful. Um, I guess that's what I would kind of yeah, those are just kind of my 2 cents.
No, I totally believe I totally and I totally embrace that because with Prime Alpha, we're always thinking about, we could help you build a brand, we could help you with leads gen, we could help you with prospecting, but at the end of the day, they're investing in you. That
Yeah,
it's you. That's it. Like, do they like you? Do they trust you? Are you providing transparency? Do you have, the pedigree? You could go on, but it's you.
right.
It's the person who's managing their capital and stewards of, you know, their capital. So I think that's so important. And I totally agree with you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think Amanda, I think that look, I think first of all, I think you guys did a wonderful job of Prime Alpha, just in kind of like you guys are a great service to the emerging manager community. That's for sure. Like as you mentioned, we did a podcast way back, you know, in COVID time when we were really small. And look, I think that just to kind of lend some, examples from sports, because I'm a big sports guy and like I really enjoy just kind of like just reading in general. So I just love books and reading. But look, I mean, for example, right, like if you look at kind of great athletes, right? Like if you look at someone like Michael Phelps, right? I mean, I don't know how many people are familiar with this story. They kind of are, but like they were familiar with his 8 gold medals. But what they may not be familiar with is, okay, well, for 5 years, 365 days a year, he trained. He trained on his birthday, he trained on Christmas, he trained on New Year's, he trained on Easter. I mean, he took not a single day off. And so that's one of the things that not a lot of people really know, you know? And so, look, it's not rocket science, right? If someone has that level of commitment and then you throw in a little bit of natural talent, eventually, you know what? They'll become wildly successful at whatever they apply themselves to. So if Michael Phelps decided, hey, look, I don't want to be an Olympic gold medal swimmer, right? When he was was a youngster, he said, hey, look, I want to be a hedge fund manager. You know what, Amanda? With that level of commitment, I can assure you he'd be a pretty darn good hedge fund manager as well. Maybe not the greatest. I mean, again, there's other factors. You have to have a certain amount of natural capacity. But, with that level of dedication and commitment, you know what? He would be pretty successful at anything he applied himself to, right? And I think that that's kind of like, at least for me, when I read a lot of these biographies of great people, you can kind of see, okay, well, the level of dedication and commitment they had was just 10 steps higher than everyone else. And that's one thing, again, I would tell emerging managers is like, look, I mean, how dedicated are you? Right? I mean, do you have that level of dedication? And if you have that level of dedication, don't worry, rest assured, in due time, the success will be there, And if you don't have that level of dedication, you know what? That's not wrong either. There's nothing wrong with that, but at least be honest with yourself about why those results aren't there
Yeah.
after X number of years.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. You need, and then you also have to I mean, I think, you have the drive, but you also have put yourself out there because, we always say, if you're not marketing or selling, you're being outsold, right?
Right,
So
right,
if
right.
you're not out there, like with the podcast, doing webinars, going to events, sending out content, doing, all these things that you need to do, um, then that's also part of the drive. Like it's not just, driving great performance, but it's also putting yourself out there to have success in, getting AUM for your fund or product. So I think that's also, like what you did. And when we did our first podcast during COVID, because what I saw was all these emerging managers struggling, like just struggling because the conferences were closed, right? You
Yeah.
can't travel, you can't get on a plane. You couldn't see any, you couldn't even have dinner with someone, right? You couldn't go to their offices. And I'm like, okay, what can we do here at Prime Alpha to help emerging managers? And remember, I didn't charge anything. We were doing
Yeah,
2 podcasts a day, just to help people get visibility, because a lot of fund managers don't understand that kind of content, social media, like creating a lead gen around that. So we kind of did that for the emerging manager community. And I know it's really funny. I'd love for you to tell me the story about like how it's, 4 years later, it's still out there.
yeah. It's great. No, Amanda, listen, I think that like, look, I think the service you provided and continuing to provide, I think is fantastic because like to your point, obviously during COVID, it became vividly apparent, right? That look, as a manager, conferences are closed, but you still need to get your name out there. So, hey, social media, podcasts, like what we're doing now, that's the name of the game, right? Um, so look, I think that, yeah, I mean, I think that this type of format, like a fireside chat type thing, I think is,
Yeah.
I personally think it is invaluable for sure. Um, with that being said, look, I mean, Amanda, you've obviously met lots of hedge fund managers. Maybe some of them just don't feel comfortable in this type of a setting, right? Which is okay too. But yeah, definitely, I think that like these types of podcasts, Amanda, like the one we did, 5 years ago, the great thing is that once you do it, it's there online, right? So if somebody's really interested in you, well, they can watch it, right? Which is, I think, is the best part about these types of podcasts, particularly the one that we did 5 years ago, right? Um,
Yeah.
and again, it's just a great way to get to know someone, right? And it's just again, like video, I think is very, very powerful. It's a very powerful tool for kind of getting to know someone virtually. Look, it's almost like a first meeting, right? Um, Better than a first meeting in a lot of ways, because if I meet someone at a conference like iConnections, well, people may forget about it, let's be honest, right? 6 months later, because I'm one of 25 people they met.
Yeah.
Right? Let's be
Yeah.
honest,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And as an investor, like every investor can relate to this, there's so many meetings, right? And they're so
Mm.
short. It's like speed dating on steroids, right? They're like, you don't really feel as if you really maybe got to know the person, or maybe you kind of forgot what they said.
Yeah.
Um, Honestly, maybe you're retired, after having so many meetings in a day. But look, video is great because it's there. You can
Yeah.
access it anytime you want in the comfort of your home. So yeah,
Yeah.
I can't say enough good things about this format.
Yeah, thank you. So iConnections, since you mentioned that, we help emerging managers with iConnections. So we had a client who just went to the one in New York. We got them 30 meetings. Um, and it was good. Like he's still talking to one of them. But the biggest mistake we see emerging managers make in those conferences is the follow-up. They get the one, they got to get the meeting. So there's a lot of like they don't really know how to manage that. And then the two is then the follow up. It's just like you think you get the meeting and then the ticket size, the ticket comes in. No, it's about building relationships over a long period of time. I mean, we've been talking about 26 touch points.
Yes,
And
yes,
so people are like, what? I thought before when I started 10 years ago, we were talking about 8 touch points. So it went
yeah,
from 8 to 26.
right, right. Amanda, what's next? It's going to go from 26 to what, like 56?
Oh gosh, I hope not. But a touch point, people don't understand how like, a touch point could be someone and you don't even know they're touching you, right? Because someone
Yeah,
watched your video, someone
totally.
watched this thing, they saw a social post that you did, they went to your blog, they had a
Right.
meeting, there was a second meeting, they read some commentary. So it's many, many touch points. So yeah, I could totally see it going to 50. I honestly could.
Yeah,
Um, so because but the thing is you don't know, like it's hard to tell where all the touch points went. We had one client that went to iConnections and the investor read a commentary, read another email, he read like 3, super engaged, and then we asked him for the meeting and he took the meeting because he remembered the emailers that we sent him, but
yeah.
otherwise he wouldn't have taken the meeting. but those are touch points we didn't even know.
Right, right. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, no, I think
Yeah,
it's look, I think the whole concept of 26 touch points I think is
yeah,
great. I think like at a high level, look, I mean, you just have to obviously, you know, build that relationship. And how do you build a relationship with anyone? It's just obviously just constant communication, right?
exactly.
That's really
Totally. Yeah.
what it boils down to. So
You didn't hire an internal marketer.
no, never.
It's like, so why? And what advice? I mean, like that obviously worked for you, but I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Okay, so I can tell you, Amanda, why I didn't hire a marketer. Look, first of all, it's just really expensive. That's the biggest reason. Honestly, even if we did have the money, I still would not invest in a marketer. I would much rather hire a developer or data scientist that could further enhance our program. Um, Now, I'm not discounting obviously the value that internal marketers provide by any means, but it's not so consistent with my style, um, is what I would say. Uh, Again, I'm not putting them down in any way, but I just think that like for us, first of all, look, it wasn't even really an option just because the economics behind it. I mean, they're just really expensive. So it's honestly something I never even considered. Especially as an emerging manager, it just didn't make any financial sense whatsoever. Uh, we just didn't have the budget, period, for something like that. Um, but look, I have no doubt that like they help for sure, especially in terms of like getting that first meeting. I have no doubt that like look, it definitely helps. And look, who knows? Maybe we would have raised capital faster. I don't know. Yeah, that's definitely true. Um, But the hard reality is, as an emerging manager, you have a budget and you have to adhere to that budget. And the reality is like, look, back when you met me when I was 5 million, look, $5 million, that's not gonna even cover your bills, right? Let alone your personal paycheck. It won't cover either of them, right? So you have to be really lean and really, really focus on what's the highest priority. What I would say. Um, so yeah, having an internal marketer, it's definitely a luxury, but not a necessity.
Yeah.
But I can't deny the fact that, yeah, you'll definitely get a lot more meetings. You'll get a lot more touch points, as you stated. So
Yeah. It's interesting because I always say, because I started my career as an accountant, as an emerging manager, please do a budget. Like you're going to spend something on marketing, whether it's going to iConnections, buying a database, you're still spending, tens of thousands of dollars on marketing.
yeah,
So even if your budget, for the year is, let's $50,000, let's say, right? Just use it wisely. Make sure you're getting an ROI on that. Um, because I feel like there's a lot of things you can do it within every budget tier, you know, because marketing is, I mean, honestly, it's unlimited. It's like there's no limit to marketing. I
yeah,
mean, the big firms are spending tens, 20, 30, $50 million on marketing. So how do you get something similar to that as an emerging manager? And that's always the things I think about. So, and I think we've solved pretty close, pretty close to helping emerging managers kind of get that kind of level of sophistication. But I think there's always something at every budget level. It's just a matter of first do the budget,
yeah, yeah,
because what happens is when there's no budget, like I know you had a budget. When people come to me and have no budget, it's atrophy. They actually don't know what to do. It's really interesting when you don't have like some parameters. You're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know
yeah.
what to
No,
spend.
that's a good point. Yeah, for sure. Um, Yeah, look, I think being an emerging manager, these are all really difficult questions. It's just, it's the nature of the beast until you kind of get that break. It's just really challenging. You have to be really lean. That goes without saying.
Yep.
The $1 million question, Amanda, as an emerging manager is like, okay, well, how long do I have to be lean for? And the challenge is like, there's no answer to that question. Like, is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? I would say you have to have at least 3 years of like savings where you can run on zero income for 3 years. Um, that's not an easy thing. That's why I explicitly said, look, if I was a family office investor investing in an emerging manager, you have to get to know their lifestyle. If they're living a little bit of a more expensive lifestyle, that's not a bad thing. But dollars are dollars. Like, the money I spent on my car, I could have spent on something else. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but people don't really think like this. Like, it's interesting. Everything is holistic in reality, right? Like, you know what I mean? I only have a certain amount of dollars in front of me. I can spend that on my house, my car, or my business. You see what I mean? So if I'm really lean in some other areas, like my house and my car, then as a family office investor, like you should kind of view that favorably. Like if I have a really nice house and car, that's not a problem. But you just have to kind of understand as an investor, okay, well, what's that manager's burnout rate? Are they going to be able to last another 18 months? You see what I mean? And these are all difficult questions to answer because heck, for all you know, maybe I come from a really wealthy family.
Yeah.
I can stomach that, no problem. In which case, again, like, what are my motivations? Like, if my family's already really wealthy, well, am I doing this just to, I don't know, just as a side gig, like, hey, let's see if it works. Man, it looks kind of cool. Let's see if it works. Man, I didn't get capital in like 12, 18 months. I have one or two investors. Let me just call it a day. Like, I see this all the time. Like, I don't even know the background of the hedge fund managers, but I went to that CTA Expo conference year after year a while ago. And I swear, like 95% of the managers, if not more than that, maybe 98 or 99%, 2 years later, they weren't there anymore. So what happened? I don't know. Like when they were there, they had great returns. They were marketing, like they were even giving like spending money on one of those boots to so clearly they had good returns, but then like, okay, well, what happened? I don't know. Maybe they went to a drawdown. They're like, okay, well, it's not worth it anymore, right? I mean, let me get a job at Goldman Sachs as a quant, and I can earn at least 300K a year, right? So it's like, as an investor, you have to really understand, like, you really have to understand all these human personality dynamics at play. It is not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but what I'm saying is like, what I've seen over and over again, Amanda, is like family offices, most investors for that matter, what they do is they just focus on the numbers. The numbers are great. Okay, well, here's a paycheck. And you have to have the other stuff, right? You have to have the office and things like that. But you know what I mean? But what I'm trying to say is like those numbers won't always be there. You know what I mean? Those numbers are eventually going to go negative or they're going to go flat. That's $1 million question. Then what does the manager do? Are they going to quit and call it a day and just apply to Goldman Sachs? Or are they going to say, well, no, this is something I really want and I'm going to stick through it? That's the $1 million question you as a family office investor have to be able to answer, right? When those numbers aren't there anymore, well, how's that manager going to react? Are they going to go cry in a corner? Are they gonna call it quits? I
Mhm.
mean, these are the questions. These are really the $1 million questions I feel, which you really have to have at least have some handle over as an investor. To be honest, I always feel that the returns are of secondary importance because as we've seen, Amanda, returns are cyclical, right? I mean, returns are good one day, but okay, they're not good the next day, right?
Right.
And generally what happens is like if a strategy has a really great period of performance, guess what? After that, it's underperformance, right? I mean, there's just cycles,
Yeah.
right? And so yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was trying to get at a deeper level. It's like, look, I mean, as an investor, there's no way around doing the hard work of getting to know the manager. That's just the bottom line. Um,
So it's interesting what you're saying because I hear like what you're pointing out. Like if you look at you're saying is it's also decision making, right? Are you making bad business decisions? If you're making bad business decisions because you're overspending or you're buying a car versus reinvesting in your business, then you're obviously going to carry that mindset, right, into your fun or the way you just think, right?
yeah,
It's a holistic thinking across the board. It's not just insular to investing. It's like, oh, is he or she making bad business decisions if he's doing that or she's doing that? then why wouldn't that carry over to other things within the firm? And I think that's so true. And that totally resonates with me when you're saying, like, you got to look at, what do they do on the weekends? Like,
Yeah,
how do they spend their money? Like it's just overall, do they make good decisions? Right. And then do they have the
yes.
fortitude to continue in bad times? I think that's really important. I agree with you.
Well, yeah, and the funny thing is, like, look, every hedge fund manager, every athlete eventually goes through a bad time.
Yeah.
Like it's not, and
Yeah.
I think that like if you're investing in an emerging manager, what's hard is that you haven't seen those bad times yet, right? So that's where there is some value to investing in a big fund because presumably you've
Yeah.
seen them go through good times and bad times.
Yeah.
And fund manager obviously stuck through it. With an emerging manager, there's a lot of opportunity, but with that, you have to have a clear understanding when times go bad, how is this individual going to react? It's pretty binary. They either stick with it or they quit. And that's where you got to get to know the person at a deeper level. I mean, the only advice I can give at a further level is like, how do you know if that person's going to really stick with it? Look, it just boils down to, how committed are they? Like I can say in our case, for example, okay, we spent 1 year, okay, on the sidelines with no pay because we had a really strict non-compete. My partner and I, we spent 1 year with no pay, just building our technological infrastructure necessary to trade that we felt would give us a long-term competitive advantage. Okay. So now the thing is, the funny thing about this is that I mentioned this, but it takes a little bit more of like a deeper reasoning to understand. Well, look, I can tell you, I went through terrible times myself, right? Like I mentioned, like there's several times where I woke up in the middle of the night, I just started crying. I'm like, what the heck is going on, right? Like my bank account's going down month after month. I'm working my brains out. When is this going to end? And the funny thing is, Amanda, in those moments, like at least for me, you know, I look back and be like, hold on a second, look at how much work I put in to get here, right? It wasn't a little bit of work, it was a lot of work, right? 1 entire year just working day and night just to build the infrastructure, right? And then on top of that, just building all the strategies. Like it was so much work, right? Just to get to where I was, right? That I'm like, you know what? Like there's the option of quitting is not even an option. It's not even an alternative. Emotionally, I may feel like crap. So just get the emotions out of my system. If I have to cry, just cry. But that option was never even an alternative. You see what I mean? And for me, I can say the reason why it was never an option was because I put so much into it. You know what I mean? It wasn't something I decided on a whim. Oh, let me just start a hedge fund tomorrow, right? Because I did well as an employee. No. I did do really well as an employee. Don't get me wrong. But then my partner and I discussed it. We talked about it. You know what I mean? And ultimately, we spent several years actually building out this whole infrastructure. And for me to say, oh, you know what? Oh, let me just go get a job, at Goldman Sachs. I'm like, that's not even an option. Like, I put so much into it. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like a life's work. You know what I mean? Like, I can't, right? So that's what I'm trying to get. It's kind of like saying, like, look, I have a lot of family members who are in medicine, right? And so, look, a lot of them don't necessarily like what they do. Okay, it's honest truth, right? But they don't quit and be like, oh no, let me go back to law school and be a lawyer, right? They don't say, oh, let me get an MBA from Wharton. I'm tired of being a doctor. Well, they may be tired, but why would they not do that? Because you know what, Amanda, they had to spend 4 years of medical school, residency, then all the training that comes after that. After all that training, are they going to quit and just go do something else? No, of course not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think when starting a business, like it's important to understand all of these dynamics. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to understand the journey that person's been on. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, like if the person really, really loves and is obsessed with what they do, then look, eventually, whatever goal they have, other things have to come into place. But eventually, I feel like that goal will likely get reached. It's just kind of the way on a deeper level, kind of life works. And in business, like look, I mean, all the business success stories that we see. You look at a guy like Bill Gates, Michael Phelps type story, right? I don't know if you ever read The Road Ahead that his dad wrote, but his dad said, look, Bill Gates in his early years, he spent 5 years and he took 5 days of vacation, including weekends, for 5 years.
Yeah.
so, and that was his level of commitment. So it's no surprise that Microsoft is kind of is what it is. But I'm saying even if Microsoft failed, Bill Gates would have started something else. Even if that failed, fine, he would start something else. And eventually, with that type of work ethic, Amanda,
Yeah.
you see what I mean? Like, so that's what I mean, like just knowing the person, the personality behind it.
So, okay, so what do you think is when you look at other emerging managers, like what are some like mistakes that you're seeing that they're making or things that you would say like, hey, think about these things because this is the things that I'm seeing that you might want to think twice about.
Yeah, I would say again, like, I think emerging managers, it's a tough, look, it's really tough. It's just not, there's no easy way around it, honestly. And like you asked me that great question earlier, what would I say to my $5 million self? It's like, look, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough. And the honest truth is, Amanda, like, there's really no one there for you. Meaning that you have family, you have friends, and look, which are great, right? They give you words of advice, words of encouragement. But you know what? You still got to walk that path, okay? And there's just no way around that. So you have to have the courage and the fortitude to walk it. And then, you have to ask yourself again, like, why are you doing this? Like, is it again, like just to be famous? I mean, like, why are you doing it? Everyone's motivations are different. But I think it's really important as an emerging manager to ask yourself that question, right? And it's a really important one. And so I think that like you have to do that self-reflection, especially in fields like this, which again, the reality is that, you know, you're going to be working hard for a long period of time with no results, which can really break down pretty much anyone, right? It's kind of like training to be a professional athlete, right? Everyone's got to go through it, right? It's a process that everyone has to go through. And the $1 million question is, okay, well, how badly do you want that goal? Do you kind of sort of want it? Do you really want it? Or are you obsessed with it?
Yeah.
Right? And I would say, honestly, if you're not obsessed with it, then I would say, hey, look, maybe it's time to kind of consider something else, not in a negative way, right? But I'm just, just have to be really, really honest with yourself. It's kind of like saying, put it this way, I have 2 kids, right? And so I have a son that loves to play soccer, and I like soccer a lot too. You have tons of people who obviously, what kid doesn't want to be a professional athlete?
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a professional athlete as well. But then the $1 million question is, okay, well, obviously you have to have the talent. But then beyond that, any coach will say is, okay, well, do you have the work ethic and drive to train day after day after day after day for a very long period of time? And honestly, not everyone has that, and that's okay too, right? So that's what I would tell emerging managers. And again, just going back to just being authentic, again, just being your authentic self. I'm not saying don't read advice about marketing, because I've read my share of that myself. But to be honest, I found a lot of that. It's more confusing than anything else because everyone has an opinion about the best way to market. And there is no best way to market. It just depends on you as a human being and what style really,
Yeah.
is most consistent with kind of who you are.
Yeah. I 100% agree. We always say we have to look at the personality of the PM
Yeah,
because, some people are really shy. Some people are
right.
super extroverts. Some people love to write. Some people love to be on video. It's one size does not fit all. And we've seen programs work for one manager and totally fail for another manager. And you got to take this very agile approach and, you know, try it, test it. If it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't, move on.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Totally. All right.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you this question. So if you could sit down with every family office and institutional investor, what's
Wow.
the one thing you'd want them to understand about emerging managers?
Oh gosh. I would say the first thing they should really understand, Amanda, is that emerging managers are people first and hedge fund managers second.
Okay.
That's the first thing I would say. So I would really tell all family offices, like, look, get to know the person first, right? If you want to invest with them, and get to know the hedge fund manager also, but getting to know the person first is, I would say, even more important than getting to know the hedge fund manager. What I mean by that is getting to know the hedge fund manager means, okay, show me your returns. let me put it in my optimizer, let me see how it fits into the portfolio. Definitely do that. I'm not saying don't do that. But I would say, look, get to know the person, right? Who is that person? What is their lifestyle? What time do they wake up? Like what time do they wake up in the morning? What does their day look like? What do they do on a Friday evening? What do they do on Saturday? What do they do on Sunday? Get to know them and what makes them tick. Like as an allocator, like if I was an investor, the first question I would ask myself is, okay, well, this manager, why are they doing it? Right? I mean, and that's not an easy question to answer, right? Are they doing it for the money? Okay, so when the hedge fund manager gets the money, guess what? They're going to stop working, right? I mean, going back to a sports example, everyone knows Michael Phelps. He won 8 gold medals in 2008, but you know what happened after that? He stopped. He didn't really train a whole lot. So then you can imagine his success actually went down dramatically. And right, and so that could have been predicted very easily, just based if you observed him carefully, that decline in success could have been observed very easily. So that analogy is also true in our space, right? A lot of times you see hedge funds who do really well, but all of a sudden, oh, their track record goes down the tubes. And everyone's kind of scratching their heads thinking, okay, well, what happened? Oh, the strategy stopped working. That's possible, but all my years of testing, Amanda, honestly, like strategies go through cycles. And what may have happened is that, you know what, maybe that person gave up, right? Or maybe the person accumulated a lot of wealth and their motivations changed. Like maybe they decided, heck, you know what, I don't need to work 12 hours a day at this hedge fund anymore. I have 3 Lamborghinis, I'm on my fourth. I mean, like, how many more cars do I need? And so I think that that's really, really important when predicting who's going to be successful and who's not. It's like, what's the motivation behind that hedge fund manager?
Oh, yeah, totally agree with you. I mean, it's the hedge fund industry is really, I mean, right now, I think we're on this like advent of like big change in the hedge fund space. I think emerging managers are really struggling more than ever. Their big is getting bigger. And then there's also this consolidation play.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm just very curious to see where the space is going. And obviously, there's like this whole, thing around ETFs. I mean, that's a big conversation I'm having with a ton of people.
yeah,
So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to is it just going to be it's just big funds and that's it. And there's no more emerging managers where I feel like there's great ideas. There's this, I mean, I would feel very sad if that happened because then there's no new, right? Um, there's no opportunity for talent.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, Amanda, my take on this is, look, I kind of heard, I guess the same ideas kind of resonate in our industry, like, after many years. So, like, for example, like many years ago, I had a podcast like this, in which someone was asking me, okay, well, are we not going to need humans in the future, right? Because you have algorithms, you have AI, etc. And I told the respective individual that I don't foresee that ever happening, like humans just being replaced, right? And so I can see how one may think that they could be replaced, but I don't really see it. So on the same kind of tone, I think that emerging managers, yeah, definitely it's challenging. I'm not saying it's not challenging. Um, but you know what? If you can deliver good returns, which are uncorrelated, you know what? There's always a market for that. Like there's no shortage of wealth in the world. Let's be honest, right? Like there's no shortage of rich people. And like the number of rich people, it just keeps going up. As the stock market makes new highs, right? Just logically, right? The number of rich people just keeps going up. And they need to invest their money somewhere, right? Like they can only put money, a lot of them are invested in the S&P 500, but everyone's looking to put in something else. That something else could be real estate, which is illiquid. But look, especially if you're providing value, I think that there'll always be a market for providing value, you know what I mean, at a high level. And investing, the good thing is like you can quantify that value very easily, right? Especially in our space, because futures obviously are so liquid, right? There's a daily settlement price. It's official, right? There's no question marks around the valuations. right? So if you're adding value, like truly adding value and outperforming, then there'll always be a market for it, right? That's the first thing I would say. It's kind of like saying, I have this joke, right, internally, right? Like um, how many data scientists does it take to change a light bulb? Well, none, because they've automated it, right? Right? How many engineers does it take to change a light bulb? 20, because takes 10 to create a robot, and the other 10 to program the robot to walk up the ladder and change a light bulb, right? And so the point I'm trying to get at is that a lot of times we can overcomplicate problems. Do you know what I mean? Like, sure, there's a problem, right? But like we overcomplicate it in the sense that it's not as complex as we really think it is, in the sense that, you know what, like if I can take $100 and multiply that to, let's say, $120 by year end on average, look, I mean, you're gonna have a market for that. Trust me. You know what I mean? If you can actually do that, you know, don't worry. I mean, like, you know, if you can actually multiply capital, like there'll always be people kind of like be ready to give you money, assuming obviously, like you said, like you've done the outreach, right? It's not gonna fall from the sky. I wish it would, but right? It's definitely not gonna fall from the sky. You have to put yourself out there. But with that being said, like, look, if you're adding a lot of value, I'm like, there's always going to be demand.
So here's my final question. What would make you most excited to wake up and come to work 5 years from now?
Um, I think, you know, just really working on new projects. Like, you know, I'm always kind of working on new kind of ways, new strategies, basically. I'm always kind of working on new strategies, which is a huge source of excitement for me. Um, and also just kind of for me, you know, for the people that know me, you know, I think that for me, another source of motivation, which kind of keeps me, which always makes me very excited to wake up in the morning and go to work, is you know, just knowing that I kind of made a positive impact, right? I mean, for me at least, like that's really important to me personally. Just kind of knowing that, look, I made a positive difference in the world. And again, for different people, it may mean different things, right? Because that space is so large. But for me, it just means, look, first and foremost, just kind of like, you know, being really good to all my employees, you know, making sure that, you know, just kind of they feel like they're welcomed and kind of like honored. And then also at a higher level, just kind of like, you know, just, you know, leaving behind some type of legacy whereby you really feel as if like, look, you kind of like, you know, you kind of improve society in some way. And again, that could take a different shape for many people. But yeah, for me, that's always something that gets me really excited. And that kind of goes hand in hand with, look, just constantly working on different research projects, just constantly working on new strategies, right? Because obviously the better our product is as a hedge fund, well, the greater capacity I have to kind of like, you know, make a positive impact in our society. And you know, one of the great things about being a hedge fund manager is that you do have influence, I would say, like aside from like money, which obviously that in and of itself gives you influence, but people, I think, recognize that it's one of those professions, Amanda, like it's really difficult to say the least. It's basically like trying to be a professional athlete, right? So for that reason, I think that there are certain professions which, at least in our society, people do respect for the simple reason that, look, it just takes tremendous amounts of perseverance to kind of reach that goal. And I think once you kind of have that, then I think that for me personally, that there's an obligation to kind of like, you know, to give back, right, in some way, shape, or form, which again, the great thing about the hedge fund industry is you see many people doing it. And again, hopefully that trend continues.
Well, I can't believe it. 4 years later, we're back together.
Here we are. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely. I think,
Thanks for doing this, Kapil. It was so good. I mean, when I got the call, I was so excited for you. So congratulations. And, I can't wait to follow you on this journey.
yeah, definitely. I'll definitely keep it posted. And thank you for kind of like the great work you guys all do at Prime Alpha. Hopefully, your business continues to thrive, which I'm sure it will. You know, just again, I think the whole format I think is great. And I think, look, you guys are doing a great service to the emerging manager community. So definitely keep it up.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome.